What is up, all you GBA type fans? We're back, week 3 power rankings, with me, a new guest that I did, of course, tease last week after our week 2 rankings with CJ, our very own analyst. This week, we have a good friend of mine, someone who is very into football. Unfortunately, though, he's a goddamn Patriots fan, but a good guy nonetheless. Please introduce yourself.
Yo, what's going on, guys? Johnny GB here, bringing you guys GBA Power Rankings with Tom.
So, he and I, of course, made lists. This is going to be based off of CJ's list from week 2. We are going to start off with Magic, Memphis Grizzlies. You can lead off.
I would say for a good 45 minutes of the game versus Astor, there could have been potential for him to actually win the game, and then it all just fell apart within that last 15 minutes. Once Astor pretty much got that combined up with the Cresselia, there's not much that Magic could have done really to stay in the game or even just make the differential any closer than it was. It was unfortunate that Astor got the synchronized burn on the Milotic. That probably dragged the game on a little bit longer than it should have gone. But just overall, the plays that Magic were making really did not put him in any sort of position to win. It was kind of playing for differential in a sense.
I'll give him the one props is kind of inverse to what you said. I do kind of appreciate the fact that he did let Melodic get burned instead of potentially being toxic, which of course would have wore it down way quicker than if it was only taking the 6% each turn. But besides that, I'm going to go to week 2 of Let's Bash into Magic as hard as I possibly can. And he played very on autopilot, so to say. Never took control, took absolutely zero initiative besides letting Arcanine come in on rocks, spikes, flare blitz damage, and I believe possibly Rocky Helmet, just to then go ahead and die. And he was very surprised by the majority of Astor's plays, his moves, his sets. And it really kind of shows that his team is incredibly passive with such lackluster offense. It claims no pressure onto his opponent. It claims no stake into determining how the match goes in his favor. He just kind of goes out there and just goes, whatever, just gonna play my game, and doesn't really talk himself through his plays, unlike the clear opposite, which is Astor. The entire time you listen to Astor's video, he's talking out his plays, he's clear, he's concise, he's a continuous stream of consciousness. Magic is just kind of sitting there quiet, doesn't really know what he's doing, doesn't really weigh out his options, his risks, his benefits, just kind of plays. He didn't see the sub or the combine coming from Crest, and once he got the first combine, like you said, it was GG. That is where Magic is probably going to stay, and it's going to make claims very nicely to the bottom of the power rankings. Next up, we have Papa C of the New York Lynx. Now, with Papa C, again, another player who is kind of struggling to an extent. He made a few misplays, basically allowing, Meloetta and Tapu Koko to pretty much bust through the large majority of his team. Didn't really take any type of means to do anything, mostly because I think the matchup really did favor Koko and Meloetta primarily. He really needed to make a lot of doubles and a lot of aggressive plays early in the match, because when he did attempt to make the good doubles, to make aggressive plays, a little too late, a little too late I would say, because the match kind of was over from that point. It's like garbage time, you make plays then and offense looks good, but match is already over, dude. Doesn't matter if there's points, if there's time on the clock. The way that Randy used AV Muck really showed that Manaphy definitely needed the special attack boost in order to, effectively break through a lot of Randy's team. And finally, just the Exadrill sack and overall lack of aggressive doubles, like I said, to gain any sort of momentum did in for Papa. He needs to fix it, or he's going to be right there with Magic. Johnny?
Yeah, so, very simple. One for Papa C, it was the misplays. It started early on with Meloetta being able to pick off Sylveon, and then Excadrill back-to-back was just really poor on Papa C's part, simply because he needs that Excadrill for the Tapu Koko. You have nothing for a Tapu Koko on your team, and just having Meloetta go in and pick off 2 kills already weakened really just didn't benefit him in any way late in the game for him to even try to make a comeback. Alolan Muck is an really underrated Pokemon in Sun and Moon format, because it deals with a lot of special attackers in the meta, and its typing just helps it out so much more. Just being able to eat the Hydro Vortex and get a good chunk of damage off on the Manaphy to pretty much guarantee the win for him. But as far as Papacy, you see his transactions really didn't help his team much. Hoopa, for some reason, people think of it as this great wall breaker, but it's been very underwhelming this season so far. So there's some things that play style he's going to need to fix. He's going to need to really just switch it up as far as building and really play smart, but a little bit more aggressive than what he was.
I don't even think that it was just Tapu Koko that pretty much wrecked Papacy's team. It's like Randy had 4 great options, and he didn't even bring one, to just like blow through the entirety of Papacy's team. Seeds, Hawlucha, and Koko, Meloetta, and then even to an extent Hydreigon. Those 4 just put a lot of pressure on Papacy's team, and to an extent even Mega Scissor as well, because like we saw, the superpower had Papacy stayed in with the Excadrill turn 1. That's a dead Excadrill from a superpower from a Mega Scissor. So yeah, I really do agree with what you said. Next up, we have Jack of the Norwigington Skitty. And the thing with Jack is he too, a lot of misplays, a lot of brain farts, a lot of letting his mons getting KO'd and weakened very, very early, and just a lot of whiffs on a lot of obvious things that, you know, maybe some more experienced players, you know, some more, toned players to the format would kind of see coming. And Jack, I think, those really cost him. A lot of little mistakes grown to one huge mistake, and I think this match kind of showed that. The bit of props that I'll give Jack is the fact that he did, get in Crocodile effectively in order to weaken the Mew, pop its Color Berry, and which then would have had allowed Megalopony to plow through, Jolt's team later on, had he gotten to that point. I say that because once the Registeel went down, really Jack didn't have anything for Diancie, which is not something I would ever thought I'd say. A regular Diancie ran through a team. I don't get it. I've never seen it before. And even though just a regular Diancie that just had, dual stab, toxic, stealth rock, it just did a lot of work. So that was kind of cool to see. We'll talk about more of that later. And then finally, just the high jump kick miss really inhibited any attempt for him to kind of lessen differential. Not necessarily win, barring a crit, but it was a rough ending to an already rough game. Johnny?
The prep really wasn't on point for this. Just several missed plays that allowed a lot of his Pokemon to get weakened, like you stated there. It just really set him back early, and against a player like Jolt, you can't set yourself back early because it's going to be really hard to come back, especially versus a team with like Mega Kangaskhan and Mew, where your main Lopunny switch-ins are on your opponent's side of the field with Mew and Diancie, so there's not much he really could have done. Losing the Registeel was very important one because, like you stated, the Diancie was able to put in a mini sweep there at the end. There's some aspects where there's the not as much prep as he would have liked, but then there's just also the misplays that really can't make up for even good prep. If you misplay, the best of prep still will not benefit you in that aspect.
Now, one thing I do want to point out is, so I have Jack and Papacy pretty much in the same category, you would say, in terms of their competitiveness in this league. You put them together one-on-one, and I'm going to keep Jack ahead of Papacy, even though I feel like I was a bit harder, or Jack had the worst game against the better opponent. I'm going to keep him ahead of Papacy solely for the fact that if you put these two, when these two play each other this season, I do firmly believe that Jack will beat Papacy based on team synergy and the fact that his team is overall better, and that's going to show.
Yeah, I can agree with that. Just based on a team matchup standpoint going against each other, I think Jack does have that slight edge over Papacy.
So next up we have Greg of the LA Clefable. All of our picks sans two picks match. So I'm going to let you start off with Greg.
It started off actually very solid for Greg early on in the game. He went with this semi-aggressive strategy. He wanted to get Toxic Spikes up to really wear down Abe's team. What it came down to was a couple calculation errors with Greg, most notably the Whimsicott versus the Combine Jirachi, having the wrong calc up, giving him that confidence like, hey, I live a hit, I can take out this Jirachi. That ended up setting him back later in the game and just put him in a position to where he could not kill Mamoswine, which is the second biggest misplay that he did in the game, was going for the Volt Switch against the Mamoswine, making that aggressive play, thinking that Abe had to keep his Mamoswine alive, and ended up not being able to kill the Mamoswine with a Hydro Pump like he could have. That would have opened the door for a potential late game Zygarde sweep. So thought process there is there for Greg. The aggressiveness maybe could be toned down a little to help him get into a better position to win, because he did follow his strategy. He wanted the Toxic Spikes up. He wanted to put pressure on Abe because Abe is a player that likes to set up Mons, but did not really consider potential win cons late in the game. That's what happened, not being able to get rid of that Mamoswine when he had the opportunity with the Rotom. Granted, he does have to hit the Hydro Pump, but should he hit the Hydro Pump, he probably goes on to end up winning this game.
You said a lot of really good points, things that are really not going to go ahead and repeat. But the one thing I will say about Greg is the fact that he does come in, and he's one of the very few coaches in this league that has a vision, has a concise and clear game plan, and identifies his win condition in his preparation as soon as the match starts. Something that you don't see in the likes of, well, actually the three teams below us. Teams that kind of go in with like this ragtag idea. This is what I think is going to win. This is the set that I brought that might actually do a lot of work, but never really fully explains why it's going to work, how it's going to work. Inversely, you see Greg, who comes in, has the idea that the weakness policy Celesteela is going to thrive behind a reflect and a light screen from his light clay Rotom Wash. And he, for the most part, early game, he does go ahead and executes sort of well, until he makes the over prediction with Rotom, goes for Volt Switch against Mamoswine, thinking he'd switch, no, goes for knockoff, goodbye Rotom Wash. And from there, I think that's where the whole, the train comes off the track at that point. He loses his ability to facilitate the Celesteela sweep. Things become a lot harder. His life becomes a lot less fantastic, as he would say. And he did have the misplay with the light screen, and he really had a hard time overcoming Abe's offense once he made the misplay in his calcs, and and even with the Volt Switch, and he got blown back. And it's unfortunate, because like you said, I do think he actually did have a very solid chance of winning this game had he not played himself.
Going here at number 6, we both have Danicki, coach of the Rose Raidenberg. It was just a rough start for Dan. The team really felt like it was a little off. He never fully trusted his team that he was going along with, and several times Dan just had to sack off Amon. Ended up sacking off his Espeon, Darmanitan to the Surf from Tapu Fini. So, he really came not as prepared as I feel like he would like. You could really see it in his play that he didn't really have that confidence in his team. And this is just a tough position for him, because he has shown that he can play well when there is solid prep. But this week, you just saw the prep was nowhere near what it needed to be to beat Leo. Not much else I can say about that. He was derailed from turn 1.
I think it was before that. I think before he even got into the team introduction, he sounded unconfident, he sounded unsure of himself, and he sounded like he was already defeated going into the match. And rightfully so. The team was choppy and strange, like you said, and he never really established an offense or established a presence against Leo's very fat, and actually, to an extent, offensive team. He let things take damage, and they died. Simple. The props I will give him is the fact that he did, in fact, check his happiness on Licky Licky. Good job, you're learning. I did appreciate the Nerwibid Skitty joke. That was funny. Did give me a laugh. I appreciate it. But overall, he did get blown back in these past 2 weeks. He has to step it up, because right now, he is at 6, and it is like a week 6. He can keep falling. His margin of error is dropping for a team that early on, we gave him the power rankings curse for being the best team on paper. We all know how that usually works out, and unfortunately for Dan, he is feeling the wrath of such curse. Needs to step it up because he does have some pretty stacked matchups coming up. He has already played Jolt, but now he gets Aster. He gets the likes of Abe, and then, you know, there are other coaches as well that are even below him that aren't pushovers. He can lose with Magirna. Don't know how you do that, but he can do that.
So for my number 5, I do have Leo. And now this isn't really a knock to how he played. It's more that his opponents played a little bit better than him, and that's why they're above. He didn't play bad by any means. It was just his opponents were able to play a little bit better and jump over him. I mean, it's not very often you hear of a team winning and then falling down in the power rankings, but Leo came in, and I mean, like you said, his team's bulky, but I mean, it has an offensive presence to it. Donphan put a lot of pressure on to Dan's team. I mean, it was able to really deal with the Espeon and forced a lot of switches out there with the Ice Shard. And to just go along with Tapu Fini, I mean, it took the 2 Flare Blitzes from Darmanitan, was able to pick off a kill against it to really just put himself in a position to where Magirna really can't do anything. You got Magirna versus 4 Mons, one of them being a Blaziken. He just put himself to where Magirna will not beat him, which I think is a smart thing to do. A lot of players mess up to where they let Magirna get in a position to end up sweeping him. Leo made sure that he did not put himself in that position, that Magirna can come in for free and pick up a kill, set up a trick room, set up a shift gear, which was his main goal. That was what he talked about in pregame, was he wanted to make sure he found out what his Magirna set was, whether it was trick room or shift gear, and then deal with it then. And he did that. He was able to really just narrow it down to Magirna being Dan's last Pokemon and being able to pick up a fairly easy kill against the Magirna. So no knock on Leo falling down. It was just his opponents played, his other competition played a little bit better than he did.
With that being said, I really don't have much to add in terms of Leo. Hazard removal, didn't have it, didn't matter. The crit focus blast happened, didn't matter. Played very straightforward, Dan didn't. Executed his game plan. Nothing too notable. Good job, Leo. Now, we have our number 5 and our number 3 swapped. Johnny has Leo at number 5, Abe at number 3. I have Abe at number 5, Leo at number 3. So that I'm putting Leo up number 3 because I think he has the best chance to make playoffs at this current second if playoffs started tomorrow. However, then we're going to go, I guess, inverse for me, move you up. And we're going to talk about Abe. Then we're going to talk about Randy, since he is in fact the same. Now, Abe played Greg and just applied what his team does best, and that is offense. His team pretty much just claimed stake into Greg's, like, his game plan, but said, you know what, head to hell with you. I'm applying my immense amount of offensive pressure to your team, and you're gonna like it. And from beginning to end, straight up, that's how Abe just won. The Papa Berry Mamoswine was a very smart bring. It was cool to see it not only like activate, but to also see the pressure it created for Greg after he saw the Eye of Papa Berry activate, because then it made Mamo not only an early game heavy problem for Greg's team, but a late game, which we saw, which eventually ended up being his win condition, living at 3 HP from the Zygarde E-Speed at +1 after the D-Dance. Combine Jirachi, oh my god, I had shivers because, Jesus Christ, that thing gives me nightmares. Now it gave Greg a few nightmares, even though he is a bastard back in the UBC and named it after, well, me, and it's my least favorite Pokemon, because I don't like being swept by Combine Jirachi. But it did wear and tear into Greg's team gradually, and Abe just played Greg like a fiddle. Being the end, made switches, obvious plays, and Greg just didn't. Johnny?
Alright, so Abe, I mean, he's finally making that bounce back. I mean, he's had a rough time recently in league games, but I mean, this one, he pretty much waited for Greg to slip to where he could just grab Greg and finish him off. He made predictions, but only when he needed to. That was what was very good about Abe. He didn't risk a hard switch if he didn't have to. You saw it there late in the game with the Mamoswine versus the Rotom. Didn't worry about hard switching Mamoswine out. let the Rotom Volt switch, and then was able to pick up a kill against the Rotom, ruining Greg's essential Celesteela sweep. It really seemed that he was actually one, maybe two steps ahead of where Greg was in the battle, even though it seemed like Greg was in a very good spot for most of the battle. He did play really well around the Celesteela and Zygarde, not really forcing that weakness policy from Celesteela, I believe, and really dealt with Zygarde. Granted, I mean, there could have been rolls there with the Mamoswine. It could have been interesting there in the game had Mamoswine fallen to the E-Speed, but really impressed me with how he took his normal offensive role. I mean, watching a lot of Abe, he does like to set up Mons. If he grabs a setup Mon, more than likely he will use it to set up. And seeing the Calm Mind Jirachi throw Greg off with the damage calc situation, where he just unnecessarily sacked off a Whimsicott to the Jirachi, put Abe in a much better spot. And honestly, that's why I have him up at 3. I think he's going to start getting into that rhythm now with that offensive team. I mean, he has a Primarina that sat in the back and pretty much did nothing the game, that really just damaged most of Greg's team. So I think Abe's now going to be on that upswing here, gaining momentum after this win.
Not only that, but I do think it was also kind of not impressive, but smart for him to keep Primarina in the back, because I do think that had Zygarde gotten out of hand, and even though he was kind of scared of Corkscrew Crasher, even if he had it, he did know that Primarina could take, one, or could at least burn that Z move had it come out. But it didn't, because of course Greg had Draconium Z. But just having that in the back, full health, only would have taken entry hazards and nothing else, and obviously the toxic spikes. Just keeping that in the back of his head and always knowing that that was his secondary check to Zygarde was really smart. Again, hats off to Abe. So now we're going to talk about Randy. The thing with Randy is just, he played Papa C, played a very smart match. What he's doing, to an extent, isn't broken. Like, it's not, you can call it predictable, which I will call it predictable, but the fact that he has so many things that kind of just heavily pressure his opponent, like I said earlier, Meloetta, Tapu Koko, Hawlucha, this match heavily pressured Papa C. Matches we've seen before this, we've seen Scissor, we've seen Hydreigon, both of which have also pressured their opponent's team, his opponent's team. And he is hanging up there with the big dogs. A channel which is relatively new, unknown, you might say, kind of a dark horse, is standing up to the big boys. The, very good, proven league players, and he's right up there. I think he could actually make playoffs if he continues this streak of just playing well. That's it, just play well. He plays a lot by his gut, and you saw that when he knew he would be able to KO the Sylveon with the Psyshock. It's effective now. It can bite him in the ass a little bit later, same way with the whole predictable offense thing, but again, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. It's Meloetta, even though it was burned, applied massive pressure, and whatever Meloetta didn't break, Koko and Hawlucha did. Great execution, and good job.
Really surprised on how well he is playing so far this season. Yes, I mean, it's very predictable with the Electric Seed Hawlucha, but I mean, he has so many different ways that he can win a game. You have Swords Dance Mega Scizor, you have Tapu Koko, you have Hawlucha that can set up a Swords Dance and sweep the game, you have Hydreigon, you have Meloetta who can potentially be a Calm Mind sweeper. He has a lot of good synergy on his team, and I mean, it just showed this week. Granted, I mean, you can blame matchup and everything, but I mean, he put himself in a position to where he knew what he had to sack off and when he had to sack it off. He didn't really go in there risking a Mon just trying to make a play. He knew that he needed a Hyper Voice off on Sylveon and Psyshock would kill. So he's just really going off that flow of the game, not really trying to get out of his own rhythm, which I actually find very good and very enjoyable to watch with Randy. Is he really, he explains his plays, but he also goes with what he feels like the game is going through. He doesn't need to try and force anything really early or late in the game. He lets the natural flow of the game go to him, which, I mean, it's just outstanding for him. But I mean, like you said, that strategy may not work against some of the other players, the Asters, the Jolts, the Leos. So, I mean, he's a very nice surprise. I mean, I'm pretty sure a lot of people would love to see him end up in the playoffs against those big guys and be that nice dark horse pick that everybody wants to win just out of nowhere. So I'm actually very excited to see Randy and HLD Production Channel. I mean, I know them from the Major League Pack battle, so it's very interesting to see now him in a Wi-Fi setting, playing the Wi-Fi battles.
I mean, we did see his playstyle definitely lose, and it showed to Leo, but he learned from his mistakes, and and I think the one thing about the one thing about Randy that I think other coaches may not necessarily fix, so to say, is the fact that, you know, when Randy lost, he recognized that he played too obvious, that he didn't make the play when he needed to against someone like Leo. And he fixes that for next time. It's a whole different outcome. Or at least it's a closer outcome than what he had before. So just with that in mind, I do believe that he can fix and adjust for the future, take that predictability out of the picture, and of course, just play better. Now, finally, I bring someone on the show who agrees with me. And they put Jolt where he belongs. That's not number 1. No. That's number 2. And I am going to, when we get to Aster, I will address some of the criticism that I got in the background in regards to keeping Aster above Jolt. And I'm going to let you start talking about Jolt, so the floor is yours.
Watching Jolt's plays, I mean, he kind of went on what Jack was doing. Some of just the really simple plays, switching Mew into Megalopony, saving the Diancie to pretty much get that mini sweep at the end. I mean, that was mind-blowing for me that a regular Diancie can pick up, 3 kills late in the game. So I was a little puzzled at first, like, how can this really happen with just a regular Diancie? Jolt really just had the advantage there. I mean, he had 3 very good Megalopony switch-ins depending on the set, if it carried Ice Punch or not, with Nidoqueen, and you had Mew, Diancie as well. So, I mean, he could play around the Megalopony a lot easier and just really was ahead from step 1, probably even by the time they turned on their DSs. It felt like Jolt was just a step ahead of Jack, but I just don't feel like it was enough to put him at the number 1 spot.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add to that. Smart prep. The matchup was heavily in Jolt's favor. There wasn't really a time that he didn't execute well, or in a particular matchup, he just didn't really have to play outlandishly, and it was just another good match. That's it. And with that being said, that's why I'm going to lead into Aster and kind of say why I think he is playing stronger. First, I'm going to talk about his match versus Magic. Very nice scouting initially, going into Ments, or going from Ments into Umbreon, just to ensure that he scouted for the Continental Crush coming from the Landorus T. Very smart, and, you know, it definitely, that completely threw off Magic, because he already burned his Z move on one of the fattest little pieces of shit on Aster's team and in the metagame, which I'm sure you pick a league, Umbreon has ravished somebody, or at least pissed them off to the extent where they're like, I hate this game. Geo's done it. I've seen Aster do it. You know, it's a good bond, and it showed. Spike Stack and Stealth Rock was very, very smart by Aster. Magic had no hazard control. He recognized that. The long run hazard damage versus a bulky team really weighed it down and ensured necessary KOs by Aster. And Aster did a good job of passing wishes. His entire team was healthy, healed, status free from probably about mid-game, whereas Magic team was slowly worn down from, like I said, just damage, hazards, passive, you know, residual side effects in terms of like burns and stuff. And even though there was some small inhibitors for Aster in terms of the pretty much always Scald burn, something that I'm not sure about you, Johnny, but when I click Scald, it's more like cold water, because it kind of just gets the other Pokemon a little refreshed, you know, heals them a little bit. My hot water doesn't burn. Everyone else's hot water always burns, right?
Yeah, I got that feeling there.
Right? And then, not only that, but of course, Magic had a handful of very good Dragon Tail drags against his team, getting in Salamence pretty much every single time. Didn't ever get in Cresselia, because if he did, he knew for a fact getting behind a sub, wins right there. Probably turns this game about 20 minutes shorter. You two fucks with your hour-long videos, I swear to God, that's why I don't like live comms. But sub Combine Crest, without Miss Magius in the team preview, and Z Supersonic Sky Strike from Salmage. Really smart brings by Aster. Great game, great preparation. He's my number 1. Now, I received some flack in the background in terms of why I put Aster ahead of Jolt. And a lot of people were giving me some shit because in terms of these weeks, in this league, just this league, Aster is performing better, alright? He is performing with some more interesting sets, he is performing with more interesting play, and he has a more cohesive team and a better team. You put these two teams on paper, and they will be facing off next week. They will show who's better, and I think it's Aster, because his team, his techs, what he brings to the table as a competitor, what he brings to the table versus in terms of his team composition is better than Jolt's. And that's why I'm keeping him at number 1, and I will keep him at number 1 because I do think he's going to win next week. Sorry to take all your thunder, Johnny, but I just don't like, when someone takes, measures caliber of these two players and uses the experience from other leagues. Who the fuck cares, right? This is the GBA D League. We're gonna measure it on the GBA D League, and right now, Aster is playing better, and regardless of the opponent's strength, his wins are more convincing, they're more interesting, and his team is better. That's it, Johnny.
I mean, there's not much to add there. I mean, Aster played to what he had to do to win. He was unfortunate that those Dragon Tails from Milotic didn't bring in the Cresselia. Like you said, this battle's 20-30 minutes shorter than it needed to be. So the hour-long battle between the Milotic, the Umbreon, which it's a mon that I don't ever want to see drafted. It was a battle of fat for a while. That once that Cresselia came in, it was game over. There's not much that needed to be said for that. He had his win con there that he has the Cresselia sitting in the back. If it comes in, it can set up a sub on Milotic. It outspeeds it. It can set up Calm Minds, and from there, there's not much that Magic can do against that Milotic. I thought that Continental Crush play was probably one of the better plays I've seen out of all the battles this week. It's just a basic scout, but also waste your opponent's Z move. It's going to be very interesting next week, Aster versus Jolt. Just on paper, I do agree with you. I do like Aster's team, just in the matchup-wise, much better. Hopefully it's not an hour-long battle again, because those hour-long live comms are kind of draining when sitting there trying to watch. But I do think Aster is the number 1 team just on a GBA D League. I like how you stress that. It's not based on other league performance. It's how they're doing in the GBA D League. Yes, they're both undefeated, but in terms of how they're playing, I think Aster is playing just at a little bit higher level than Jolt is. Granted, Jolt's not as slack as a player, but just in terms of the GBA D League, I think Aster is that top player right now.
We do get this marquee matchup next week. With that being said, I hope you all enjoyed. I'm going to apologize for if there's any complaints about Johnny's audio. He's on a phone. Discord really don't want to work with us. It's tolerable. I will edit it. It's fine. It's fine. You can all chill. But I hope you guys enjoyed the power rankings this week. As always, leave your rankings down below. Leave your comments down below. Who do you think will win Week 4, Aster versus Jolt? Let me know. And I'll let you know who I think is going to win Aster. With that being said, I will see you all next week. Thank you for joining me, Johnny. I appreciate your commentary. Appreciate you as a football fan, except Patriots. That being said, have a good evening, everybody. Have a good day. I'll talk to you all soon. Later.